everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. Really cool video for you today. I had the chance to check out advanced screenings of The Legend of Vox Machina coming to Amazon Prime. This is the Critical Role animation that was kickstarted 2018 or 2019, I believe it was. If you're unfamiliar with who Critical Role is, just to give you like the really brief rundown, a bunch of friends who are in the entertainment business, voice actors, writers, actors, they do a lot of stuff, creative people, got together to play D&D. Someone gave them the idea, you should stream this. I think it started on Twitch. And from my understanding in the story, is they didn't really see the point. They didn't know who would want to watch a bunch of people sit around and play D&D, and it blew up massively. That's the way it was told to me. There's a ton of people involved. I'm not just going to sit here and list a bunch of names, but look them up. I guarantee you, you know at least one, if not more of the names, and you've seen the projects they were in. I mean, they do video games, they do series, they do everything. The Legend of Vox Machina, the show, is based on the first D&D campaign this group of people did together before everything really blew up, or as it was blowing up. And they thought it would be fun to crowdfund enough money to do like a 20-minute or so kind of animated special for their fans. Given that they're all talented people anyway, they could handle the voice acting, they could handle the writing, they could probably handle some of the animation for all I know, or they hired an animation studio. However it would have worked out, they went on a Kickstarter, they were looking for a modest budget, I don't remember what it started for, but they funded it in a few hours, and they surpassed it by so much they ended up making over $11 million on Kickstarter, and it is one of the highest funded productions of this kind ever on Kickstarter, and I'm pretty sure ever on any crowdfunding. Needless to say, they had a lot more than just a 20-minute special, so they decided to expand it into a 10 or 12 episode season, somewhere in there, and went to work, and then Amazon got involved. Amazon liked the idea so much, liked what was going on, that they expanded it by an additional 12 or 14 episodes. There's going to be 24 in total, so however those numbers break down, it's somewhere in there. Amazon essentially doubled it, got the streaming rights to it, and now it's going to be 2 seasons to tell a story with these characters. Full disclosure, not that into D&D, not really into role-playing games. I've tried it once or twice throughout my life, and it just isn't for me. I'm too uptight to really get into the characters, and it's just not my thing. And I bring this up because if you're not into it, don't dismiss this show automatically thinking it's just for people who are into that kind of stuff. It's a fun fantasy series based on a fantasy world that these guys created, so it does have some of the typical tropes, you know, the classes of characters, dragons, fantasy world. There's those familiar settings, but everything is just slightly twisted. It's slightly different. It's their own version. The characters fit together, but they're not all the same. It's not, I mean, I guess you could say it's a TV family, but the interactions between them are fun. You can tell pretty early on their likes, dislikes, this and that. You get the sense that they have been together for a while, which is great for a show because they don't waste half the first season meeting each other and figuring it out and getting to know each other and then have that crap line at the end of it where, hey, we make a pretty good team, don't we? They're just into it from the beginning. Another fun thing about Vox Machina is that they're not the virtuous hero. It's not Lord of the Rings where Frodo is pure good and then you have all these other people from different walks of life who have a little bit of their own baggage, but it's a pretty sanitized fantasy world where they get to come in and just do the right thing. Again, I can't really go into tons of specifics on overall storylines for the whole season or specific things that happen in it. There are, can't think of the word, review embargoes. I mean, this is coming out the minute I was allowed to. I recorded it way in advance. And there is a separate date when we can actually talk episode to episode, and I believe that's as they air. So I apologize if this feels a little generic, but I want to give you enough for you to make the decision if you want to see it or not without giving the whole show away. The first episode, the beginning of the series, sets up who these people are, sets up what they're going about, and kind of what their goal is. And it's small. It's a small world to the point where it's kind of funny. Like, their goal is very, very modest. Doesn't seem like you need to be adventurers to pull it off. And that's part of the joke, but it also allows the show to expand and snowball and get into some depth, which I really appreciated. Because for an animated series, based on a tabletop game, especially one in your mind, primarily in your mind, I didn't have high expectations, and I almost feel bad saying so after seeing the series. When the adventures do kick off, It's exciting, it's fun, it's funny. Some characters lean more towards the action, some characters lean more toward the comedy, which I also appreciated because there's this thing that rubs me the wrong way about R-rated comedies, or what would be an R-rated comedy, is that they're almost trying too hard for shock value, like that Seth Rogen Santa thing that came out. That crap was unwatchable. And yes, it's a fun juxtaposition for cartoon characters to swear or to be into sex or something like that. And there is a bit of that. I mean, there is some swearing, there is some. It's more innuendo. It's not like a super graphic show in that way with sexuality. But it never feels like they take it too far. And there's a couple times where, the F word comes out and is like, well, is it funny because it's a cartoon character swearing, or is it funny because it's a funny joke? Maybe back off on that a little bit, but that's kind of a nitpick because the writing overall is pretty strong, it's pretty witty. It also does this fun thing where it is a fantasy world, it has fantasy elements, and it's spinning them to be modern enough where you're into the humor and into the stuff, but it's not breaking the show for you. Because even in animated series, if they're making cell phone jokes or things that are far too timely in a fantasy setting, for me, it would just rub me the wrong way and honestly seem kind of lazy. So to be able to make more modern feeling jokes in a fantasy setting, I thought was a testament to the writing and helped me stick through it. The animation style of Vox Machina, and I know who Critical Role is. I think what they're doing is cool. I also will fully admit it is not exactly my thing, so aside from surface level knowledge, I've never really dug in. I don't know if they have drawings of their characters that look exactly like this, or if they had to hire the animation studio that had to simplify them and bring them down for the sake of animation. Not really sure, but the animation style reminded me of another Amazon original series, Invincible, from last year. It's not my favorite style, but it is far from my least favorite style. It's good, it looks good, it's clean, you can tell what's going on, and they do a good job in Vox Machina of having the characters be cartoons and brightly colored and things like that, but also having brightly colored, interesting backgrounds, and then fading the background and upping the thresholds on certain things to... So it's there, but it's not distracting. Not everything looks like it's on the same plane, and I kind of got into that a little bit in Invincible, not to make a direct comparison, but just because the animation style is so simple, that there were times where it almost looked muddied, where there was a lot going on and a lot of movement going on, that the background was just as intense as the foreground, and it kind of became one thing to small degrees. Another thing Vox Machina is employing is the kind of 2.5D, I believe it's called, where it is 2D animation, but then they use some more dynamic effects, and the dynamic effects really work in atmosphere. Like there's a scene where the character's around and there's embers and things falling around them, and that looks phenomenal. It adds depth, but it doesn't look like two different animation styles clashing head on. But there's also a big battle sequence where there's a giant thing that they're fighting, and some of that looks a little early 2000s animation, like almost Beast Wars, even though it's not that computer kind of animation. It looks more traditional. It's hard to describe exactly without seeing it, but when you do see it, you'll know it's in the first couple episodes. It just kind of took me out of it a little bit. It wasn't quite as bad as the Marvel's What If animation that looked like a Telltale game, but it just... The styles clash to me, and I kind of wish they would have just stuck with the more traditional route, especially given the humbling beginnings of it being a tabletop game and it being a 2D animated series. I didn't think they needed the extra thing. I think leaving subtle touches with some special effects or environmental effects would have been a lot better. The episodes are pretty short, 20, 30 minutes average runtime, no commercials, which is awesome because it's on Amazon Prime, and they move along quick. I sat down just to watch the pilot to see if there's something I was going to be into. I mean, I was going to do a review either way. Amazon's kind enough to send us the screeners. I at least have to talk about them. No, this is not a paid promotion. I wish it was, but this is my honest opinion, so there you go. I ended up watching the first 3 all right in a row, and I was excited when I had more time later to get back to it, and I watched a couple more, and I digested it pretty quickly. I will be watching the second season. We'll probably end up talking about it. We can compare and contrast, see what has changed over time. But since I'm under the impression that they're making both seasons at the same time, I imagine it's going to feel exactly the same. And 24 episodes at 20 to 30 minutes a pop. I doubt they're running out of ideas at that point. These are talented people behind the show, so I'm sure it's going to continue the quality throughout. So the good news to you, if you do like it, there's more coming. If this is not your thing, move on. Who cares? It almost feels like it goes without say, but the voice acting's incredible. These are actors. They're voice actors. They're talented people who have been living with these characters for years. They know what they're doing. There's no flaw in the voice acting. There's really not many flaws in the dialogue. Just that thing I was mentioning before where, oh, a cartoon character swearing, where it's hilarious. Okay, fine. Let's move it on and be a little wittier than that. So obviously, the casting's spot on. These guys created it. I don't know how you can make an argument one way or the other. There were some additional actors brought in who were not originally part of Critical Role, because it's a big world that they're in. They also do a great job. So really no flaws there, which is excellent, because in an animated series, a bad voice actor can really drop you out of it and kind of diminish your enjoyment for it. So just to quickly sum it up, The Legend of Vox Machina, good animation, not great, a little too heavy on the 2.5D kind of things. The writing was spot on, a little too much attempts at shock value, but again, these are very minor nitpicks. It is well worth your time checking out. It's so cool, the origins of this thing. You gotta respect people for just doing their thing and making it their own. That's absolutely incredible. The fact that this is one of the fastest growing and highest grossing crowdfunding campaigns of all time obviously shows you that there's a dedicated fan base. That's got to be for a reason. If you're unfamiliar with Critical Role, I actually think it's worth reading like the equivalent of a Wikipedia entry or an actual Wikipedia entry just to see who the people are and how it got going, because that really made me appreciate the show that much more. To go from I'm going to play D&D with my friends to here's an animated, adult-oriented series on Amazon Prime that looks just as good as Invincible, which has the clout of the creator of Walking Dead behind it. It's right on par. It's fantastic. Like, how many times have you done something ridiculous with your friends? Could you imagine if that became a 24-episode TV show on Amazon Prime? I mean, it's unreal, that journey. And yes, they were creative people to begin with. You can make that argument. But I just think it's so awesome that they started this little thing with no intention of marketing and selling things and merchandise and an animated series. And then when they did start, they were so humble to be like, okay, let's do a 20-minute short, 24 episodes, 20 minutes plus each. It's an awesome journey, and I think it's worth checking out just for that. But the fact that it's an enjoyable show, it's that much better. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Got a lot more stuff coming your way you're not going to want to miss out. Also, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, videos, recommendations, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop some note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comedy comic series out. It's called Social Studies, and maybe this is why I was so impressed that a couple friends got together to play a game and it became an animated series, because I would love it if somewhere way down the line we could even get a 10-minute short of our comic book. It's a slice-of-life comedy comic. We do it in the style of the 90s cartoons that we grew up on and inspired us. We keep it light, we keep it fun, we tackle all the insanity we remember from going through high school. It's been really fun to kind of do that nostalgia trip, while also talking to new young readers who are maybe just heading into that world and seeing what's universal about the high school experience, but in a fun, ridiculous, cartoony way. We have 8 issues out now. Issue 9's coming in like 2 weeks. It's all available at socialstudiescomic.com. You can check out the first one for free. There's a name your price option. Just put in 0 if you want. Download it. We're also on Comixology, working on getting on Comixology Unlimited. Thanks.